Welcome back to the series I've been doing on 13 life-changing lessons by George Mack on the Modern Wisdom podcast. And today we're talking about the busy trap versus activity trap. And now to the video.
We'll go through some of the tactics that, from a strategic perspective, that you've used personally to try and defend the busy trap.
So go back to cocaine kale phone.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody should know that by now. 2 separate phones. I'd say the busy trap for me, probably the easiest thing is having a big 3. So I got this from the concept of 4,000 weeks, and having a big 3 of things I need to do. And then everything else just goes to the everything else section. And the idea of only being able to have 3 tasks on the big 3 makes you prioritize things by definition. I think ultimately the opposite of the busy trap is prioritization, which is such a difficult skill when there's infinite things coming at you.
Yeah.
Well said, George. It does sometimes feel like there's infinite things coming at you. But busy trap. So where employees or yourself become so engulfed in their task that they lose sight of the actual purpose or objective behind their task. So I have an example down here. And it's kind of like saying, I will achieve blank goal by doing blank task. And by shifting the focus from the goal to the task, you tend to lose sight of the bigger picture. And some examples of this: if you're losing weight, you might start obsessing about fasting. And actually, or if you start thinking about being healthy, you might start obsessing about fasting, and then fast to the point where it's no longer healthy because you shifted the goal from being healthy to fasting. Or if you start running because your goal is to be healthy, and then you start pushing yourself too hard and you get injured all the time like I did, then you're not exactly running for health because you're hurting yourself. An example I got from ChatGPT is a pretty good one. Sarah works in the marketing department of a tech company. Her team quarterly objective is to increase their user engagement through social media by 25%. The management, however, set a target for the team to create and post 50 pieces of content each month. Sarah and her team spend much of their time crafting posts and graphics to meet their content quota. By the end of the quarter, they successfully met their target of posting the required number of content pieces. However, despite meeting their target, the user engagement metrics showed only an increase of 10%. Wow, that sounded like a standardized test prompt. Kind of boring. But sorry, my cat's trying to jump up here in the screen. The whole purpose of that is you lose sight of the bigger picture, so you kind of have to do what I put down here of the solution. And I have the piece of paper stuck up to my wall with the 3 questions I talked about earlier. But question 1, why are we doing this? Question 2 is, does this make sense? But question 3 is this the most important thing I could be working on? So always refer back to, does this task necessarily guarantee the goal? Because sometimes we think it does. In really bad situations, we have a goal, we have a task that we think will accomplish it, and then we have another task that we think will help us accomplish this task, and we start chaining stuff together, and it's like a game of telephone. The further you get away from the actual goal, the more likely it is that you're not actually going to be working on that goal and you're just doing busy work. The activity trap is somewhat similar to that, but it's a little bit different. The activity trap is the tyrant of the mundane. It includes the trivial issues, irritations, requests, and routine activities that eat up our time and resources. I didn't like this definition much, even though I got it off the internet. The one I prefer is, and I've talked about this earlier, so it's a self-imposed state of individual. It's a self-imposed state where individuals are continuously occupy themselves with work, often out of inherent need to feel busy or equate busyness with productivity and importance. So I've talked about this a couple times on the channel, but when you work because doing something makes you feel like you're moving forward in your life, Like, this is such a big trap that type A personalities fall into. Because, like, you might have some anxiety, and you're like, if I do work, then moving forwards, that must be good, even if that work doesn't actually equate to anything. And I talked about this earlier, but you have to look at what the outputs are, not what the activities you're doing are. So by focusing on output, you actually decrease the amount of activities there are to work on and your time you have to work on those activities, because what you're doing will actually directly start moving that needle of progress instead of these tasks that don't actually matter. And you can watch on the previous videos to get more examples on those. And you're only looking at the inputs, but not at what you get done. After a while, you get stressed out because you always feel behind because nothing's actually getting done. And this just makes the anxiety worse, which makes you want to continue working even more. And it's kind of like this cycle. And a lot of things in life are cycles, and this is a particularly nasty one that you can get caught up in. Solution, like with the other one, why are we doing this? Is this the most important thing to be working on? Like, I literally have this written on my wall in my office so that I can constantly be asking myself this. And then he talked about 4,000 weeks, which is roughly how many, it's roughly a full lifetime. So I found this great summary of 4,000 weeks. I didn't remember read the book, but for this video, I just wanted to make it and get it out before I had time to do that. So stop trying to clear the deck. I mean, you're never going to finish that to-do list. And the point of it is to get the activity out of your mind to free up space, not to actually get everything done. Because the moment you fill it up, you have more stuff to do. So think of your life in terms of domains. So your work, your health, your home. You pick the most important activity for each one of those, and then you time block and you do that at those set times. And that way you can stay balanced. And then embrace the joy of missing out. You're going to miss out on a lot of stuff, but it's like, some water. I described it this way in a previous video. I said, you don't have to do anything. Like, you literally don't have to do anything. You could just sit there and allow your body to decay, and eventually you'll die. So anything you do, anything you actually decide to do, you need to embrace it, because you're like, I chose to do this. You're not being forced to do this. You could allow yourself to die. That is an option that you have. I do not recommend it. If you have those thoughts, seek medical help, but you could choose to let yourself die. So anything you do that because you chose to do it. And because of that, I say, try to enjoy it. Like, you chose to be here. You chose to do that. Like, embrace it and try to have fun with it. Like, don't be like, oh man, I have to do this. Like, I have to show up. Yeah, you could do that. I mean, it's gonna make life way worse. Or you could just be like, hey, I chose to be here. This is what I think I should be doing with my life, and I'm ready to give it my best. It's the difference between like those kids in high school or in elementary school, like, yeah, man, like my parents forced me to come here, versus the other ones that, like, this is a lot with foreign exchange students. They're like, yeah, man, my parents saved up a bunch of money, and I was able to come to this great education, and I get to learn here. And you're like, oh my God, that's such a better attitude than what a lot of people have. And then I highlighted down here, I can't do more than one thing with this time, and this is the one thing I choose to do. So be happy about it. Like, embrace it. Don't try to multitask. And then down here is another one. I thought this was a little bit better, but it's two different summaries of the book. I will do my own video where I actually read the book out. So the faster you go, the faster you try to go, the faster things come up. You're never actually going to finish your busy task. The more stuff you get accomplished, the more stuff you'll want to do. It's like, the more I learn, the less I know. The more you do, the more there is to do, because the more you realize can be done. Embrace the limits. The more you embrace your limits, the more meaningful life becomes. You are going to die. You have a limited amount of time, 4,000 weeks. ish. I mean, you've probably gone through most of those by now, or a decent amount of them. So live every moment. Like, that's literally what it's saying. It's, don't try to distract yourself from the present. Live it. It's not about being more efficient. You just end up with more work. This is kind of connected to this one right here. Hopefully my mouse shows up on the screen. And then I will zoom in and move over so we can see this one. You have to choose a few things and sacrifice everything else and deal with the inevitable sense of loss that results. Yeah, I mean, it's just what life is, but it makes the things you chose to spend your time on more beautiful, kind of. It's like you chose this because, and it's like the people who live forever, you're like, you really want that? Like, maybe, but then you kind of lose the sense of the time you have. It's like you don't have a limited amount of time, you have an infinite amount of time. So why do anything? You'll always have time to do in the future. There's no urgency to anything. This one I put a little question mark to. I'm going to come back to. Attention economy, not just time spent, but also thoughts changed. Yeah, I'm not really sure exactly what that means. Comment down below if you do. I'm wondering if it's something related to like Robert Greene, where he talks about in Mastery how your attention is one of like the most important things you have. So I will probably I'll buy the book, read it, but that video might not come out for a little while. So, and then we have the joy of missing out makes choices meaningful. I mean, they basically just reword a couple things in different ways. Lastly, we have learn to stay with the anxiety of feeling overwhelmed. Yeah, that's a big one. I've made a couple of videos talking about this and not turning away from the anxiety, not distracting yourself from it, but it's like you have to get comfortable with that feeling and then decide what activities you actually want to do. And there's always stuff to do, but you have to decide and prioritize what you actually want to get done. And it's kind of like, imagine you're in the Amazon rainforest and you're walking through the Amazon River to this giant temple that has a giant pile of gold in it, and you get bit by a piranha, and you're like, damn, it sucks. I should handle this. And you go to rip it off, and then because you slow down to rip it off, 10 more piranhas start biting you. And you realize you just have to kind of trudge ahead and keep pushing forward, keep moving to that pile of gold, that dream you have, and allow these small issues to kind of pile up. And then once you, like, because stopping to deal with all of them might necessarily slow you down enough that more will find you, and eventually they'll overwhelm you and you'll never actually accomplish that dream. So there's a balance there of dealing with the small stuff versus letting it go and knowing when it's actually small and when you thought it was small but it actually had bigger consequences down the road. And that's just living in life. But I'll make more videos talking about that. Anyways, give me 2 seconds. Click over here. I'm going to put a playlist of the videos I made so far about this content, and click right here to subscribe, and thank you and peace out.